No one could have expected what Kate had planned. It all started on an ordinary night in Austin, Texas, where Kate and her husband, Michael, had lived for years. Their marriage seemed stable from the outside, but Kate knew something was off lately. Michael was distant. His eyes always seemed to search for something other than her, and the smiles that used to be so natural now seemed forced. Kate knew something was wrong, but she never could have imagined what was coming. One Wednesday afternoon, while Michael was at work, Kate received an unexpected email. The sender was unknown, and the subject line simply read, "For your peace of mind." Normally, Kate would delete any suspicious message like this, but something about it intrigued her. Maybe it was her intuition, or the fact that for the past few months she had felt like her world was about to fall apart. With hesitation, she clicked to open the email. What she found was shocking. Photos of Michael at a restaurant in Houston, 200 miles away, having an intimate dinner with a woman Kate had never met. The shock coursed through Kate's body like an electric current. She could barely breathe, her eyes scanning the photos as if a plausible explanation might leap from the screen. The photos were clear. Michael smiling, holding the woman's hands, an expression in his eyes Kate hadn't seen in years. Without thinking twice, she picked up her phone and tried to call him, but the call went straight to voicemail. The next few hours were a blur. Kate tried to stay calm, but her heartbeat raced with each passing minute. Why would Michael lie? Who was this woman? That night, Kate decided she had to take action. But not in the way most people would expect. Instead of confronting Michael, she chose something different, a plan that involved patience and cunning. She knew that if she wanted answers, she would have to outsmart him. What Kate decided to do was invite Michael to a romantic weekend in Houston, right where the photos had been taken. She wanted to see his reactions, to sense any hesitation he might show. It was risky, but Kate was determined to find out the truth. Michael was surprised when Kate mentioned the trip. He raised an eyebrow, eyes trying to probe hers. "Houston? Just like that, out of nowhere?" he asked as he rolled up his shirt sleeve. Kate smiled, trying to look casual. "It's been so long since we went out together. I thought we could enjoy a little, just the two of us. Leave everything behind, at least for a weekend." Michael hesitated for a moment, and that was when Kate saw it. A brief shadow of discomfort crossed his face. But then he smiled. "Sure, honey. That sounds like a great idea." But something about the way he said it felt wrong. Kate's heart sank, but she kept up the facade. She knew that this weekend in Houston would be the moment when everything would come out, for better or worse. In the days leading up to the trip, Kate prepared. She wasn't just packing her bags. She was planning every move, every word she would say. The night before she left, as Michael slept soundly beside her, Kate took out his phone and, for the first time in all their years of marriage, began to search through it. It wasn't hard to find suspicious messages. Conversations with an unnamed number, messages deleted so that their context was unclear. But it was enough to confirm her suspicions. Michael was hiding something. She put the phone back in its place and lay down next to him, staring at the ceiling as sleep seemed impossible to achieve. Tomorrow, she thought, everything would start to change. Friday arrived, and Kate struggled to maintain a facade of excitement as she packed for the trip. The weather in Austin was warm, and the sun scorched the rooftops as a reminder of the sweltering heat inside Kate's chest. Michael, on the other hand, seemed to be behaving normally, oblivious to his wife's intentions. He even suggested they stop at a winery along the way, which made it seem like he was truly indulging in the romantic spirit of the trip. During the car ride to Houston, Kate watched Michael closely. He was driving, his eyes focused on the road as he talked about the latest news from work and how he was looking forward to finally getting some rest. Kate nodded, responding automatically, but in truth, she was paying attention to the details. It was as if she was studying his behavior, looking for any chinks in the armor he wore so well. They arrived at the hotel in downtown Houston, a sleek, modern place with a sleek facade. Michael was in high spirits, Or at least he did a good job of pretending that way. Kate watched every gesture, every smile he gave the receptionist as he checked in, wondering if this was the same man she knew. The man who had been so careful about every detail of his life, but who now seemed to be carrying a secret that threatened to shatter everything they had built together. As soon as they entered the room, Michael threw himself on the bed, sighing loudly. Finally some rest, right? Kate smiled, but inside, she couldn't relax. The room was large, with a spectacular view of the Houston skyline, but to Kate, everything felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around her. She took out her phone and pretended to be looking for something, while in reality, she was thinking about the best way to execute her plan. That night, Michael suggested they go to a nearby restaurant. Kate could already tell he was trying to impress her, trying to make it seem like everything was normal. But the restaurant wasn't far from where the photos of him and the other woman had been taken. Kate had done her own research before leaving Austin, figuring out exactly where the restaurant was and where the best spot to observe it without being noticed was. Sitting in the dimly lit, intimate restaurant, Kate looked at her husband as he ordered their wine. She tried to see past his smile, past the person she had known so many years ago. Suddenly, he seemed so distant, so different. When the wine arrived, Michael raised his glass, smiling. "To us, and to many happy years together." Kate raised her glass, smiling back. "To us." But the irony of the toast was not lost on her. As the evening wore on, Kate began to ask more questions about Michael's life, casually but with a different intent. She asked about his work, his friends, how he was feeling lately. Michael seemed to answer automatically, not realizing the true motivation behind the questions. But then Kate threw out a bait. "It's funny, you know? I was thinking about when we went to Houston last time. Do you remember?" Michael looked at her for a second, confused. "Last time? It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Kate smiled, watching closely. "Yeah, I thought maybe you'd come back here sometime without me, for work or something." Michael looked away for a moment, as if trying to remember, but his discomfort was palpable. "No, I don't remember coming here recently." Kate felt a chill run down her spine, a silent confirmation that he was lying. She took a deep breath, hiding the relief and pain that came with the truth that was beginning to dawn on her. Dinner ended without further incident, but Kate knew that was just the tip of the iceberg. Later, back at the hotel, while Michael was showering, Kate took the opportunity to take his phone again. This time, she wasn't just looking for suspicious messages, but something more concrete. She was after evidence. After a few minutes, she found what she was looking for, a text message from the same unknown woman, sent the day before. "I hope you're ready for our night together. I can't wait to see you." The message was there, clear as day. Kate stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Houston city lights. What was she going to do now? Confronting Michael right away seemed tempting, but she knew she needed more than just a message. She needed to expose the whole truth, not just to him, but to herself. When Michael came out of the bathroom, he found Kate sitting on the bed, staring at her phone as if she were distracted. He smiled, walked over, and gave her a kiss on the cheek. "Are you okay, love?" Kate smiled back, keeping all her feelings bottled up inside. "Yeah, I'm fine." But inside, she was bracing herself for the next step. One thing was for sure. No one could have expected what she would do next. The next morning, the weather in Houston was warm, but inside the hotel room, the air felt frozen to Kate. She woke before Michael, the first rays of sunlight streaming through the half-open curtains. She looked at her still sleeping husband and wondered how this man, who had once been her world, could now be a complete stranger. Her mind was still fixated on the message she had found the night before, and it fueled her with a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination. Determined not to let things slide, Kate knew she needed to take a careful approach. She didn't want an empty confrontation, she wanted something more. She wanted to understand why, what had driven Michael to this, and she also wanted him to see the impact of his actions. It was difficult, but she was determined to move forward without making an impulsive scene. Michael finally woke up, and after breakfast, he suggested a walk downtown. Kate agreed, but as they walked through the busy streets of Houston, her mind was racing. She decided the best way to proceed was to make Michael face the consequences of his actions, not by fighting, but by confronting him with the truth in a way he couldn't escape. The walk took them to a park, where they sat down to rest on a bench. Michael was excited, talking about plans for the future and how they needed to take more time like this to reconnect. Kate listened with a bitter smile. She knew he was trying to convince her, and maybe even himself, that everything was okay. But to Kate, those words were empty. Back at the hotel, Kate said she needed some time alone, that she was going to a nearby cafe to do some reading. Michael didn't object, perhaps even relieved to have some free time. As soon as Kate left, she called her best friend Emily, someone she had known for years and trusted completely. Emily answered after a few rings, and Kate could barely hold back her tears as she began to tell her everything. "Emily, I don't know what to do." Kate's voice was cracking, her hand shaking as she held the phone. Emily, on the other end of the line, was silent for a few seconds, absorbing the words. "I knew something was wrong when you called me out of the blue. Kate, this is serious. Are you okay? Do you feel safe there with him?" Kate took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I'm fine, Em. At least for now. I don't think he's a physical threat, but what he did, it's tearing me apart." Emily was silent, then answered, "You need solid proof, Kate. You need something that leaves no doubt. If you're going to confront him, you need to make it final, so he can't run away from the truth." Kate knew Emily was right. She decided she wouldn't go back to Austin without definitive answers. She needed more than just pictures of Michael with another woman. She needed to understand the extent of the betrayal, who this woman was, and what role she played in Michael's life. Kate returned to the hotel with a plan in mind. That night, Kate proposed to Michael that they go out and explore Houston's nightlife. Michael accepted, looking relaxed, but Kate knew there was something behind that smile, something hidden somewhere deep inside. As they walked through the brightly lit streets, Kate felt like an investigator, observing every gesture, every reaction. They entered a small, cozy bar, and after a few drinks, Michael went to the bathroom. It was the opportunity Kate needed. She pulled his phone out of his coat and took pictures of all his recent messages with the unknown woman. She knew she had to be quick. Her heart pounded as she took in every detail, her hands shaking a little. She saw messages exchanged about past encounters, plans, and even promises of a future life together. It hit Kate like a punch in the gut, but she kept her cool. She put her phone away and tried to take a deep breath before Michael returned. When he returned, she was smiling, a smile that hid all the pain she felt. It was as if she were wearing a mask, something she never imagined she would have to do in their marriage. But the truth was there, right in front of her, and now it was only a matter of time before Michael realized the game was up. They returned to the hotel, and Michael seemed more cheerful than ever, perhaps believing that the trip was rekindling something between them. He even mentioned how this time together was what they needed to rediscover the love they never lost. But to Kate, it all seemed like a show, something put on to cover up the lies. That night, as Michael slept, Kate sat on the bathroom floor with her phone in her hands. She reviewed the photos she had taken of the messages, reading each one, absorbing every painful word. The promises he had made to the other woman were too much to bear. In tears, she began to plan her next steps. She knew the truth could no longer be ignored and that it would have to come out, but at the right time and in the right way. No one could predict what she would do next, but one thing was certain. She would not emerge from this situation defeated. The next morning, the sun streamed through the hotel curtains, illuminating Kate's face as she lay awake, wondering what to do next. She had all the pieces, the messages, the photos, the certainty of betrayal, but she needed something more, something that would make her action final. The pain of discovery had been replaced by a cold determination, and as Michael still slept soundly beside her, Kate knew it was time to take the next step. She decided she would find the woman. She needed to face the person who, without even knowing it, had become part of the nightmare her life was turning into. During breakfast, Michael mentioned that he had some work to take care of and suggested that Kate take the morning off to relax. "You could go to a spa, do some shopping, enjoy Houston a little more," he said, trying to sound casual. Kate just nodded, agreeing with a fake smile. This would be her chance. As soon as Michael left, Kate went back to her phone. There was a clue in the messages. A name. Stacy. She typed the name into the search bar on her social media accounts, cross-referencing the information with the number she'd found in Michael's messages. It didn't take long for her to find the right profile. Stacy was an attractive young woman who worked in Houston and had a smile that seemed as genuine as the smiles Michael used to give her. There were several photos of Stacy in places Kate recognized from her travels with Michael. Every detail, every discovery, was like a new nail in the coffin of what she thought was a solid marriage. With a little more investigation, Kate found the address of a cafe that Stacy regularly frequented, something she frequently posted on her social media. The place wasn't too far from the hotel, and Kate decided she would go there. She needed to see Stacy up close. She needed to understand what it was about that woman that made Michael pull away so much. The cafe was charming, with outdoor seating and a relaxed atmosphere. Kate arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where she could see the entrance. She ordered a coffee and watched, her heart racing. It wasn't long before Stacy appeared. She was wearing a floral dress, her hair loose in the wind, and seemed completely oblivious to the fact that her presence there was a turning point in someone else's life. Kate watched her for a few minutes, watching her take an order from the counter and sit at a nearby table. There was something deeply unsettling about seeing the person who was involved in the destruction of her marriage without even suspecting her presence. Kate knew she had to get closer, that this moment could not be wasted. Taking a deep breath, Kate stood up and walked over to the table where Stacy was sitting. "Hi, sorry to interrupt. Are you Stacy?" she asked, trying to sound casual, as if she were just a potential acquaintance. Stacy looked at her in surprise, but smiled politely. "Yes, that's me. Have we met?" Kate hesitated for a second, but decided to go ahead. "I'm Kate, Michael's wife." Stacy's face changed instantly. Her smile disappeared, and a look of shock filled her eyes. She looked around, as if searching for a way out, but Kate didn't give her any space. She sat down in the chair across from her and continued. "I know about you too, Stacy. I know you didn't know I existed, so I'm not here to fight with you. I just need to understand." Stacy seemed to break down. She looked down, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know he was still married," she whispered, her hands shaking around her coffee cup. "He said he was getting a divorce, that the marriage was over." The words hit Kate like a blow. The anger she'd been holding in for so long began to bubble up, but she held it back. She didn't want a scene, she wanted answers. "Did you know he was here with his wife this weekend?" Kate asked, her voice controlled but thick with pain. Stacy shook her head, tears already filling her eyes. "No, he didn't tell me anything. I thought he was going to stay with me." She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. "I'm sorry, I really didn't know." Kate stood up, her heart heavy. There was a part of her that wanted to scream, that wanted to blame Stacy for everything, but the truth was that Michael had lied to both of them. "You're not the one who needs to apologize," she said, pushing away from the table. "But I appreciate you being honest." Before Stacy could respond, Kate turned and walked out of the cafe. As she walked through the streets of Houston, Kate felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. She knew for sure now, not only was Michael cheating on her, but he was lying to Stacy as well, creating a story in which he was the victim of an unhappy marriage ready to start over. The betrayal went even deeper than she had imagined, and the knowledge brought a painful clarity. Back at the hotel, Kate found Michael in the lobby, looking relaxed and unconcerned. "Did you have a good time at the spa?" he asked, smiling. Kate forced a smile in response. "Yes, it was great. Very relaxing." But deep down, she knew the moment of confrontation was approaching. She wouldn't let him get away with it this time. No one could predict what Kate would do, but one thing was certain. Michael was not prepared to face the woman she had become. At the end of the day, Kate was back in her hotel room, trying to keep up appearances as Michael suggested they have dinner at a rooftop restaurant. He seemed to be in a great mood, as if everything was perfect between them. With every smile Michael offered, every kind word, Kate felt like a knife was being stabbed in her confidence. She knew she had to stay calm, that she had to stick to her plan until the right moment. She agreed to dinner, even though she knew something inside her had broken forever. As she got ready, she chose a red dress that Michael always liked, put on soft makeup, and wore her best smile as a mask. That night, she didn't want Michael to suspect anything. She wanted him to believe that everything was perfect until the last second. In the elevator that took them to the restaurant, Michael held her hand and commented on how happy he was to see her in good spirits again. Kate just smiled in response, while inside she felt a mixture of contempt and sadness. She realized how he had an almost pathological ability to disconnect from reality, to construct a narrative in which he was the hero, the devoted husband. But in a few hours, he would see the extent of his own lies. At the restaurant, Michael ordered a bottle of wine, and the two began their dinner with light conversation. Kate, however, was distant, planning every move, every word she would say. She knew she couldn't just explode in anger. She wanted Michael to feel confronted with the truth in a way he couldn't escape. After a few glasses of wine, when dinner was almost over, Kate decided it was time to act. She picked up her phone and placed it on the table, looking directly at Michael. "There's something I need to show you, Michael," she said, her voice firm but controlled. Michael looked confused for a moment, his eyes flicking from Kate's face to the phone on the table. Kate opened the photo gallery, revealing the images of the messages exchanged between Michael and Stacy. She swiped her finger across the screen, showing each one, the tension rising in the air. Michael stared at his phone, his expression changing from curiosity to shock. He fell silent, his hand still holding the fork, which was now suspended in midair. "What's this, Kate?" he asked, his voice hesitant, clearly stalling for time. Kate just stared at him, her eyes cold, without a trace of hesitation. "These are your messages, Michael. Messages between you and Stacy. I ran into her today, you know? She had no idea you were still married. You lied to her, just like you lied to me." Michael swallowed, his eyes wide as he tried to come up with an answer. He looked bewildered, like an actor who had forgotten his lines halfway through a play. I can explain," he began, but Kate cut him off. "No, Michael. There is no explanation that can justify what you did. You lied to both of us. You used us to fuel your own illusions while you pretended to be the perfect husband." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the sound of silverware and laughter from other diners in the restaurant echoing in the background, as if they were in a parallel reality. Michael looked down, clearly at a loss for words. Kate continued, "I'm not here to hear your apologies, Michael. I wanted you to see what you did. I wanted you to know that I know, and that I'm not going to be a part of it anymore." Michael looked desperate now, reaching for Kate's hand, but she recoiled, pulling away from him. "Kate, please. I made a mistake. I was confused. I love you," he whispered, but the words sounded hollow, lacking the weight of truth Kate needed. She shook her head, standing up from the table. "You don't love anyone but yourself, Michael. I've wasted too much time believing lies. Now, it's time for me to move on." She walked away from the table, leaving Michael alone, staring into space as if trying to process what had just happened. Kate walked out of the restaurant without looking back, her heart heavy but her resolve stronger than ever. She knew this would not be an easy breakup. There would be explanations, arguments, pain. But she was ready for all of it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control over her life again. Back in her room, Kate began to pack her things. She wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, to leave Houston and leave this painful part of her history behind. As she packed her clothes into her suitcase, she felt a mixture of sadness and relief. She was closing a chapter she never imagined she would have to live, but she knew there was something liberating about finally seeing the truth and acting on it. When she finished packing, she looked around the room once more. It was a beautiful, elegant space, but to her, it was now just the scene of a nightmare that was finally ending. She grabbed her car keys and drove away without a sound, leaving behind a Michael who was no longer part of the future she was beginning to imagine. Kate drove down the highway, leaving Houston behind, her eyes fixed on the road as her thoughts raced. It was early in the morning and there was little traffic, which provided a feeling of tranquility. The brightness of the streetlights mixed with the tears that ran down his face. Every kilometer covered felt like she was moving away from the pain, but at the same time she knew that the real challenge was yet to come. It was as if, at that moment, Kate was between the past and the future, and emotions were mixed in an overwhelming way. After a few hours of traveling, she decided to stop at a roadside inn. She was exhausted, both mentally and physically, and knew she needed to rest before facing the next step. Kate walked into the simple room and threw herself on the bed, the weight of reality finally crashing down on her. She picked up her phone and saw a few messages from Michael. Messages begging for forgiveness, swearing love and regret. She didn't respond to any of them. She knew that any response would trap her back in the cycle of lies, and she wasn't about to give him any more of that power. That night, Kate fell asleep with a mixture of sadness and hope. He knew he was at the beginning of a long and painful journey of starting over, but, for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that there could be something more, something better than the life he had been leading. He woke up at dawn, the sound of cars passing on the road a constant reminder that life went on, no matter what had happened. On the way back to Austin, Kate began to think about her life, her choices, her dreams that had long ago been abandoned in favor of a marriage that now seemed like a lie. She thought about all the things she had always wanted to do, the trips she had put off, the projects she had never started. Suddenly, the idea of starting over from scratch didn't seem so daunting. It felt like a chance to finally be free. Arriving in Austin, Kate decided not to go straight to the house she shared with Michael. She drove to Emily's house, her best friend. She knew she would need support and that Emily would be the right person to provide it. When she parked in front of her friend's house, she took a deep breath, as if preparing herself to face a new reality. Emily opened the door, surprised to see Kate there so early and alone, but she didn't need any words to understand what had happened. Kate's face, the expression of tiredness and sadness, said it all. Emily hugged her tightly, and Kate finally allowed the tears to come. She cried on her friend's shoulder, feeling the pain of betrayal, of the end of a dream that she believed would last forever. Emily took Kate inside, made a strong coffee, and they sat in the kitchen while Kate told her everything. About the texts, about meeting Stacy, about the confrontation at the restaurant. Emily listened quietly, holding Kate's hand when her voice wavered. When Kate finished, Emily sighed, shaking her head. "You did what you had to do, Kate. I'm so proud of you. I know it hurts right now, but it will pass. And you'll find that you deserve so much more than him." Kate nodded, Emily's words bringing some comfort amidst the chaos. She knew the next few days would be difficult. She would need to go home, talk to Michael, divide up her assets, explain to her family and friends what had happened. But most of all, she knew she would need to find a new way to live, a way that didn't require her to depend on someone else to make her feel whole. As Emily supported her, the two began discussing what Kate would do next. Emily suggested that she take some time for herself, perhaps a trip, something that would help her disconnect from the pain and find her own essence. The idea began to take root in Kate's mind. Maybe a trip was exactly what she needed, time to breathe and rethink her choices. Later that day, Kate returned to the house she shared with Michael. The place felt different now, as if it was no longer the home she had built. Michael was there, waiting for her. He looked haggard, as if he had aged years in a single day. When she entered, he stood up, his voice filled with a desperation Kate had never heard before. "Kate, please, I can explain. I can change, I will do anything." Kate stared at him for a moment, and realized there was nothing more to be said. She had already made her choice, and she knew that any attempt at reconciliation would only prolong the inevitable. "Michael, I don't want your apology. I don't want this life anymore. I need to move on, and so do you." He tried to argue, but Kate cut him off. "Please, let's do this as peacefully as possible. I don't want to fight, I don't want to yell. I just want to get out of this with my dignity." Michael was silent, his eyes filled with tears, but he knew there was nothing more he could do. Kate had made up her mind, and he couldn't change that anymore. She began to pack her things, putting her clothes into suitcases, while Michael just watched, as if in shock. Each piece of clothing she kept was like she was leaving behind a piece of a life that no longer existed. That night, Kate left the house she shared with Michael, leaving behind a part of her story. She went to Emily's house, where she would stay until she decided what she would do next. As he drove through the streets of Austin, he felt a mixture of fear and freedom. She didn't know what the future held for her, but for the first time, she was willing to find out, without fear, without strings attached, without lies. Kate knew there was a long journey ahead of her. The divorce process, the memories that would need to be overcome, the painful moments that would still come. But she also knew that for the first time in a long time, she was doing something for herself. She was choosing her own happiness. She was allowing herself to start over. And as she settled into her friend's house that night, she thought about all the things she wanted to do from now on. A trip, a new project, maybe even a new place to live. She knew the possibilities were endless, and that the future, even though uncertain, could be so much more promising than anything she had left behind. The next few days were a chaotic mix of excitement and action. Kate had moved out of Michael's house, and now the process of organizing her new life began in earnest. She decided to stay at Emily's house for a few days while she sorted out the practicalities of her divorce and tried to find a place of her own to live. Each day was a small victory, a step toward a freedom she was still trying to understand. Michael kept texting her. He apologized, he wanted to talk, he promised to change. But Kate was determined. She knew that going back to him would mean getting lost again in a cycle of broken promises and false hopes. It was a painful process, but with Emily by her side, Kate felt surrounded by love and support, which helped her stay focused. On a particularly hot afternoon, while sitting in Emily's backyard, Kate made a decision. She needed time to herself, away from everything that reminded her of Michael, the pain and the lies. It was time to reconnect with herself, to find a way to fill the empty spaces left by the end of her marriage. She decided she would take a trip, a time to heal her wounds and perhaps discover new possibilities. After talking to Emily and receiving all her friends' support, Kate bought a ticket to California. He chose Napa Valley, an area he always wanted to visit. The wine views, the peaceful climate, and the idea of getting away from it all for a while appealed deeply to her. Emily helped her organize the trip, and soon Kate had her bags ready to embark on this new adventure. Upon arriving in California, Kate felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a lightness. The air felt different, fresher, and the idea of spending days just with herself, without obligations, filled her with a peace she hadn't experienced in years. She rented a cabin on a small wine estate, surrounded by rolling hills and vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. That would be his refuge. The first few days were dedicated to simply resting. Kate spent her mornings walking through the vineyards, enjoying the silence and the aroma of ripe grapes. In the afternoon, she allowed herself to relax with a good book, something she hadn't done in a long time, always too busy with the chores and worries of her wedding. This place offered him a feeling of invigorating isolation, as if he were far from any shadow of the past. But the trip was also an opportunity to meet new people. One evening, Kate decided to visit one of the nearby wineries for a wine tasting. She didn't know what to expect, but she wanted to escape the solitude of the cabin and allow herself to try something new. When she arrived at the winery, she was greeted with a warm smile by the owner, a man named Peter, who appeared to be in his 40s and had a friendly and welcoming demeanor. Peter showed Kate the different types of wine they produced, explaining every detail of the winemaking process with passion. He seemed genuinely interested in making her feel comfortable and included in the small community of the winery. As the evening went on, the two began to talk about their lives. Kate shared a little about her situation without going into too much detail, and Peter listened attentively, sharing some of his own personal experiences and challenges. What Kate didn't expect was to feel such a natural connection with someone she had just met. It wasn't about romance or physical attraction. It was about finding someone who, in some way, understood what she was going through, someone who had also been through challenges and was willing to move forward. Peter made her laugh, something that seemed to have been forgotten amid the chaos of the last few months. That night, as she walked back to the cottage, Kate realized that something inside her was changing. It was as if the pain was beginning to dissipate, giving way to something new and unknown. Over the next few days, Peter invited Kate to explore the area, and she accepted. He took her on a tour of Napa, visiting places that tourists rarely see. They hiked hidden trails, tasted local wines, and lost themselves in conversations that ranged from everyday banalities to deep discussions about life and the challenges they had both faced. Peter never forced anything, never tried to overstep the boundaries that Kate clearly had. And this made her feel safe, ready to let new people into her life, albeit slowly and gradually. One afternoon, as they sat on a gazebo with an incredible view of the vineyards, Peter looked at Kate and said something that stuck with her. "Sometimes things have to fall apart so we can build something new, something that really makes sense." Kate felt his words resonate in her heart. Maybe what she was experiencing was not the end, but a new beginning, a chance to build something that was genuine, something that made sense to her and not to please someone else. The trip to Napa Valley was a turning point. Kate began to see life with new eyes. When it was time to return to Austin, she was no longer the same. Something in her had changed profoundly. Not only her perception of what she wanted for the future, but the belief that she deserved to be happy, that she could be happy alone, without needing to rely on anyone to feel complete. Back at Emily's house, Kate knew she still had a long road ahead of her. Her divorce from Michael needed to be finalized, and she needed to find a new place to live and start her life over. But now, there was new hope. She had a plan, and more importantly, she had rediscovered her own strength. Napa Valley had been more than a trip, it had been an inner journey, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. Returning to Austin brought with it a mix of expectations and challenges for Kate. She had rediscovered herself in Napa Valley, and now it was time to put everything she had learned into practice. Her priority was to finalize her divorce from Michael and find a new place to call home. But before that, Kate knew she had to face the most difficult moment, the formal termination of her marriage. That meant one last conversation, face to face, to put an end to everything. She arranged to meet Michael at a quiet coffee shop, a place where they could talk without being interrupted. Michael seemed nervous when he arrived. His eyes searched hers for something, maybe regret or a glimmer of hope. But what he found was a woman who seemed to have transformed into someone stronger, someone who was no longer willing to carry the weight of lies and empty promises. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Michael said, his voice hesitant. He sounded smaller now, vulnerable, almost regretful, but Kate knew she couldn't let herself get caught up in his emotions again. She needed to be firm, clear, and put this behind her. "Michael, I just want to end this in a civil manner. We need to sign the papers and move on. There's nothing more we can do here," she said, trying to sound as calm and matter-of-fact as possible. Michael started talking about how he missed her, how he was willing to change, but Kate just listened to him without letting his words sink in. She couldn't go back. The memories of the good times they had together were there, but they were obscured by lies, by betrayal. And after Napa, Kate knew she had much more to discover about herself, about life, than she could have with Michael. After a long conversation, Kate was finally able to close that chapter. Michael looked dejected, but he accepted the inevitable. He signed the papers and, for the first time, Kate felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She left the coffee shop with a sense of relief, knowing that something had truly ended. Something that had needed to be closed for a long time. The next few days were spent organizing her new life. Kate found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Austin. It was cozy, with a view of a nearby park. It was perfect for the fresh start she had been longing for. As she packed her things into her new home, Kate found herself smiling. There was a pleasure in choosing every detail, every object, knowing that this space was hers alone. For the first time, she felt like she was building something that truly represented her, without compromise. A week after moving in, Kate received a text from Peter. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, but she was happy to see his name pop up on her phone. Peter asked her how she was doing and if she had found what she was looking for in Austin. Kate responded, briefly telling him about her new apartment and how she was focused on building her life again. Peter, in turn, told her that he was planning on visiting Austin soon and asked if she would like to meet for coffee. Kate smiled when she read the text. There was no pressure, no expectations, just a friendly invitation. When Peter arrived in Austin, they met at a coffee shop downtown. It was strange at first, seeing someone from such an intense and recent time in her life now on her turf, in her city, felt almost surreal. But soon the conversation flowed, as it always did between them. Peter was easygoing, unassuming, and seemed to genuinely care about her, without forcing any kind of intimacy. He was a living reminder of what she had discovered about herself in Napa, the strength to move forward, the ability to heal, and most of all, the freedom to live on her own terms. Peter talked about the winery, about how he'd thought about her a lot since she'd left. Kate listened, and for the first time, she realized that maybe there could be something more there. But it wasn't something she wanted to rush into, it wasn't something that needed defining right now. She didn't want to jump into a new relationship just to fill a void. This time, she wanted to build something that was based on trust, respect, and, most of all, freedom. They spent the afternoon together, talking and laughing, and as they walked through the streets of Austin, Kate felt something new, a calm, a sense that life could be beautiful again. At the end of the day, Peter walked her to her new apartment. They said goodbye at the door, and Peter, always respectful, didn't try to go beyond a long, affectionate hug. Kate was grateful for that. Grateful to find someone who didn't try to rush her, who understood the value of time and patience. She watched him leave, and when she walked into her apartment, she realized that for the first time she no longer felt the emptiness that had been so frightening for the past few months. With the divorce officially finalized and a new life unfolding before her, Kate felt like she was finally in control of her own destiny. There were still wounds that needed time to heal, memories that returned from time to time with pain, but there was also hope, and that hope was growing with each passing day. The apartment, the job, the new friendships, it all felt like a genuine new beginning, and she knew that from now on, any choices she made would be because she truly wanted to, not because she felt she had to. Little by little, Kate began to get involved in activities that she always wanted to do, but never found the space to explore. She signed up for a painting class, something that had always fascinated her since her youth, but had been put aside when her priorities revolved around Michael and marriage. Painting became a way of expressing his emotions, of transforming pain into color, of channeling all the energy that had accumulated during those years. Each brushstroke was a step towards her freedom, each painting a part of her story being told in a new way. Kate began to realize that life could be more than she had imagined, that it could be rich, colorful, full of nuances, without having to limit herself to one person, one love. As the sun set over Austin, Kate looked out the window of her new apartment, watching the city lights begin to shine. She knew the road ahead was still long, but now she was prepared, ready for whatever the future held, and open to the possibilities that lay ahead. Her fear was slowly being replaced by confidence, and her sadness by hope. Kate had finally found something that had always been denied her: the freedom to be herself. The following weeks were a kind of rebirth for Kate. Now that she was living in her new apartment, life seemed to take on new contours, and the colors that had previously seemed dull now appeared more vivid. She had allowed herself to immerse herself in new experiences, like painting classes and walks in the park at dawn, where the fresh air and silence of the morning brought a peace she had not felt for a long time. For the first time, she had complete control over her life, her choices, and her future. Peter remained in touch, and Kate appreciated the easy pace they established. There were no expectations, just shared moments that helped them both move forward in their own ways. Peter returned to Napa after that visit to Austin, but they had kept in regular conversation ever since. Kate felt no urgency to put a label on their relationship. Instead, she appreciated the affection and friendship that was blossoming between them, knowing that anything beyond that would happen in due time. Kate began participating in local art shows, not as a renowned artist, but as someone who was in a constant process of learning and discovery. His paintings, full of vibrant colors and layers of emotion, began to gain some recognition. At one of the small community exhibitions, Kate met other local artists, people who were also there not for fame, but for the simple joy of creating. That artistic community became a refuge for Kate, a place where she felt welcomed and understood. In between these encounters, Kate met Lisa, a talented and witty artist who invited her to participate in a group collaboration for a mural in one of Austin's neighborhoods. The idea was for each artist to contribute a part of the mural, forming a work that represents the challenges and new beginnings of life. Kate was excited about the idea. She felt that, in a way, that mural was a reflection of what she herself was experiencing. A collage of experiences, good and bad, that shaped her, but that, in the end, created something beautiful and unique. During her days working on the mural, Kate began to realize something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. She was part of something bigger, a support and creation network that welcomed her as she was, without judgment, without unrealistic expectations. It made her realize that a true fresh start wasn't just about leaving Michael behind, but rather about finding a new purpose, a new community, and most of all, a new version of herself. Working on the mural became a kind of therapy. Kate, along with the other artists, spent hours painting, talking, laughing. Each color she applied to the wall seemed to bring more life not only to the mural, but to her own soul. One day, while they were working, Lisa looked at Kate and said, "You know you're blossoming, right? I can see it in your eyes." That stuck with Kate. For the first time, she truly felt like she was blossoming, not because someone told her so, but because she finally believed it. In the midst of this growing up process, Kate received a call that took her by surprise. It was Stacy, the woman involved in Michael's relationship. Stacy had gotten Kate's number from Emily, and she apologized for invading her space, but said she needed to talk to her. At first, Kate was hesitant. She didn't want to reopen wounds, didn't want to reconnect with the past she was finally leaving behind. But Stacy seemed sincere, and something in her voice made her agree to meet with her. They met at a small coffee shop, away from the hustle and bustle of downtown Austin. Kate didn't know what to expect, but when she saw Stacy, she could tell the other woman was just as nervous as she was. Stacy began to talk, telling her how things had fallen apart for her too after the full truth about Michael had been discovered. She talked about the lies, the pain of finding out she had been used, and how it had affected her deeply. Stacy wasn't there to justify anything, but to ask for forgiveness and, in a way, to seek the closure they both needed. Kate listened to her, and instead of anger, she felt empathy. They were two women who had been deceived by someone they thought they knew. There was no reason for hard feelings between them. When Stacy finished, Kate took her hand and said, "I know you didn't know. And I'm over it. There's no anger here anymore. I just hope you can move on and find your own happiness." That conversation was liberating. Stacy thanked her, and the two said goodbye amicably. Kate left the cafe feeling like a cycle had finally come to an end. There were no more pending issues, no more hurt feelings. She had forgiven Michael and, more importantly, she had forgiven herself for having believed in him for so long. The next day, when Kate returned to the mural, she looked at her work so far and felt proud. There was something beautiful about turning pain into art, about creating something vibrant and full of life from difficult experiences. She knew that this mural, when completed, would be a symbol of her journey, of a woman who had faced the worst, but chose to move forward and create beauty from it. As the weeks passed, Kate continued to explore her new life with curiosity and courage. Peter sent messages, saying he would like to visit her again, and Kate knew that this time she was ready to welcome him, without fear, without insecurity. She didn't know exactly what the future held for them, but that didn't matter anymore. She was ready to enjoy the present, to live each moment without the pressures and expectations that had previously limited her. The mural was finished within a month. When Kate put the finishing touches on it, she felt a sense of satisfaction. The neighborhood residents gathered for the unveiling, and Kate saw children running around the mural, senior citizens taking pictures, and families admiring the work she and the other artists had done. Lisa came up to her and gave her a big hug. "You did this, Kate. This is part of you, and it's beautiful." Kate smiled, tears in her eyes, knowing that this mural truly represented everything she was: the pain, the struggles, the triumphs, and most of all, the ability to start over. As night fell and the lights illuminated the mural, Kate felt a deep sense of peace. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she was exactly where she wanted to be. With the mural finished and her new life finally taking shape, Kate felt ready for whatever came next. There were no more doubts or shadows hanging over her, and most of all, no more fear of the unknown. Each day was an opportunity to explore a little more of herself, to reconnect with the person she had lost throughout her marriage to Michael. She had found peace in her routine, comfort in her friendships, and a new passion for art. A week after the mural was unveiled, Kate received an unexpected email. It was an invitation to participate in an exhibition at a small gallery in Austin that showcased emerging artists from the local community. The proposal was for Kate to present some of the work she had produced over the past few months. The surprise was so great that she had to read the email more than once to make sure it was real. It was an acknowledgement of her work, something she had never imagined possible. Amidst so much uncertainty and rebuilding, it represented a personal victory, a testament to how far she had come. Without hesitation, Kate accepted the invitation. She spent the next few days choosing the paintings that best represented her journey. The exhibition was not just an opportunity to showcase her talent, but a chance to tell the story of her transformation, of how she had faced hardship and chosen to create something beautiful from it. Each painting was a piece of her life, from the moments of sadness to the more recent moments of hope and freedom. On the day of the show, Kate was nervous but deeply excited. Emily accompanied her, her faithful friend by her side from the first moment everything fell apart. "You deserve this, Kate. Every bit of this happiness," Emily said, holding her hand as they entered the gallery. Kate smiled, feeling grateful for everything, even the hardships. Without them, she would never have allowed herself to grow the way she did. Inside the gallery, Kate's work was prominently displayed. The vibrant colors were eye-catching, and each painting seemed to tell a different part of the story. As she watched people walk by, admiring her work, Kate realized how far she had come. She was no longer the insecure woman who depended on the love of someone who didn't deserve her. She was someone who had found her own voice, her own strength, and she was proud of it. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the gallery, Kate spotted Peter. He had made a promise to return to Austin, and he had kept it. He stood there, a genuine smile on his face, his eyes shining with pride as he admired Kate's work. When their eyes met, Peter waved and walked over to her. "I told you you were blossoming, and look at that." "You're amazing, Kate," he said, his voice thick with affection. Kate felt her heart warm. There was something special about Peter, something that went beyond friendship and comfort. He was someone who truly saw her, who understood her pains and her victories without ever trying to force anything. "Thank you for being here, Peter." "It means a lot to me," she replied, smiling. They walked through the gallery together, Peter listening to the stories behind each painting, while Kate shared her inspirations. Each painting was a piece of her, and Peter seemed genuinely interested in learning every detail, every emotion. There was no rush between them, just a calm presence for each other, something Kate finally allowed herself to enjoy without fear or insecurity. Late in the evening, as the gallery began to empty, Kate and Peter went for a walk around the city. The air was cool, and the night was quiet, with few people on the streets. They walked side by side in silence, soaking up the atmosphere of the night. When they reached the park near Kate's apartment, the two of them sat on a bench, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Peter held Kate's hand, gently and lovingly, and looked at her. "I don't want to rush anything, Kate. I know you're rebuilding everything, and I want you to know that I'll be here, no matter what you decide," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. Kate looked at him, realizing how much those words meant. It wasn't about rushing or needing to define things. It was about being present, about allowing yourself to feel and move forward in a healthy and light way. Kate smiled, squeezing Peter's hand. "I'm ready to move on, Peter. But I want to do it slowly, in my own way. And I'd be happy if you were there for me for that." Peter smiled, and for the first time, Kate felt like she was making the right choice. A choice that wasn't based on fear of being alone, but on a sincere desire to share moments with someone who respected and valued her for who she was. The months that followed were filled with new experiences. Kate and Peter began seeing each other more, exploring Austin together, traveling to Napa occasionally, and discovering new things about each other. There was no pressure, no demands. There was just a mutual desire to live each moment with ease and sincerity. The artistic community also continued to be an important part of Kate's life. She got involved in new projects, worked on more murals, and participated in other exhibitions. His art was expanding, and along with that, his confidence grew every day. Kate saw herself as a complete woman, capable of facing whatever the future brought. And while the past still lingered in some memories, it no longer had the power to define who she was. Michael had tried to reconnect, but Kate had known how to set boundaries. There was no longer any room for him in her life, and she didn't have to carry that burden. Now she was free to love, to create, to be who she truly wanted to be. That night, on a small balcony in Kate's apartment, Peter held her close as they gazed up at the stars. "You have a light that is all your own, Kate. And it's beautiful to see how you light up the world around you," he whispered. Kate snuggled into his embrace, feeling the truth in his words. She had found her own light, and she knew that no matter what, she would never let that light go out again. It was the beginning of a new story, a story that was hers alone, but one that she was willing to share. A story of resilience, courage, and self-love, where each chapter was written with freedom and passion. Kate was finally at peace. And most of all, she was happy.